You can make that comment.
You're live.
We are live. This is Senate Transportation. It's Friday, March 15th. We are going over the Transportation Bill, H.868. We have JFO here to talk to us about some sections where the bill moves some money around. So we wanted you to walk us through that so you understand the implications of this transfer of money. Take it away. Or maybe not. Maybe not. Let's wait. So, change of plans. Logan, you kicked out of the
I'll come back.
No. And Representative Coffey, Chair Coffey, please join us.
Sorry for the back and forth.
We're still talking about the same bill, so.
All right, that's
We were just gonna have Logan walk us through the sections of the first 2-3 steps where you're moving.
okay, great. So Sarah Coffey, for the record, Sarah Coffey, Chair of House Transportation Committee, and I apologize. House got a really late start, and there were a few.
And you were late last night.
Maybe we were late last night. Yeah. So anyway, I'm here, and I'm happy to. I know you've started working on the. You're deep into the bill. It sounds like already. So happy to do whatever you'd like me to do. Would you? Since an overview is not necessarily necessary.
Yeah, we probably don't need an overview, but I was talking to Chair Maz about how we've done this in the past. So it's also your, just like what highlights, what priorities from your view as the chair of the committee and
absolutely
what you want us to.
And don't hide anything either, okay?
Tell us.
Oh, don't hide. Oh, hello. I'm turning around. You can't see. It's good to see you, Senator Mazza. Happy to be here. So I'll have you on my shoulder.
keep your eye on her, okay?
Tell us where you hid.
So I'm happy to do that. And so I think to give you a little bit of context for where we started thinking about the bill. We started the session with a joint hearing, 2-day hearing with the House Environment and Energy Committee for the purpose of really, thinking a lot about the impacts of the July flooding and then December flooding. And thinking about how we can respond to that, thinking, our infrastructure, but also build in resiliency. So we heard from a lot of the folks that from the Agency of Natural Resources. So we heard a lot about dams and
we have a bill.
Yeah, you have a bill. Yes, the case passed the Senate, right?
We have an appropriation.
Yeah, so I know that the Senate's been focusing on this too. So that's where we had the state climatologists talk to us, and we heard from a lot of regional planning commission folks. So I think one of the big intents was to look at, how do we support our communities at the local level. And so you'll see with some of the changes that we made to the governor's recommended budget, they were focused on that to increase town highway aid and town highway structures, because those were we really dove in deep with the agency about what in their program really targeted and helped communities with that work. So that was an important piece. And the committee was also focused on, we had a bill H.693, which was the Transportation Infrastructure and Resiliency Act. And we pulled in a lot of the policy from that bill, but we refined it but through conversations with the agency and testimony with a number of stakeholders. So, and that bill was really focusing on, looking at our carbon, the Global Warming Solutions Act and those targets that are set out for the transportation sector. And this committee knows that our transportation sector in Vermont contributes 40% of Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions. So we got a report, and we all got this report in November from the agency, the Carbon Reduction Plan, which then with some suggestions.
I think
He was talking to somebody.
Oh, okay, sorry.
All right, sorry.
I didn't know, Senator Mazza, if you had a question about that. So
No, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
So remember, you're not muted.
I know.
So that informed a lot of our work. And so, because we have been, one of the main tools in our toolbox has been the electrification of vehicles. So we wanted to make sure that there were, we thought a little bit about what are some of the barriers to adoption of electric vehicles. So there are some sections in the bill that address that, such as community charging. I believe you had some testimony in about the community charging that is with the funds that went to ACCD and the partnership with Green Mountain Power, and seeing how successful that program is, but the money is really kind of more committed, and that they could use a little bit more funding. And folks who don't own their homes, and so the focus we made on some of that decision to move $1.7 million to support that work was to focus it on workplaces and multi-unit dwellings. The other area that we kind of in the similar vein was, we started to hear anecdotal stories about how, depending on where you live and what your utility provider is, you may have more or less access to the power required at your home to charge at home. And I think in an ideal world, we would have been able to do, we need to collect more data on that. So we had the PUC come in to give that report that we all get on the transportation, the charging rates for electric vehicles. And they were willing to we got to have a good conversation with them about how would we get at that data and that information. And so they suggested that it was an aligned tariff rates across utilities, and they were willing to do that work as long as it was included in the report that they're already doing. They have their final report due us next January.
They were in here yesterday.
Oh, terrific. Okay, so I don't know if you got to go deeper, but we think that we had something that they felt that they could do. And then I think the last piece in the bill that was important to the committee with regard to looking at our policy strategies that to continue to address our greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation space, was I believe it's section 30 of the bill, which is the work that the state treasurer along with the Climate Action Office will do to study both cap and invest programs that are going on. There are two, one in New York State and the Western Climate Initiative. And the role of the treasurer is really important because it's not only about, carbon reductions, it's also the invest part and also the affordability, how it impacts Vermonters. So having the treasurer's perspective in that work is really critical, because we know that we're looking for, how do we sustain our work in this space, and the other states that have done the cap and invest program are using that to fund their EV incentive programs, for example, so, and other things. So we felt that that was an important addition and really appreciated the work and the collaboration that the agency transportation, the secretary at the agency natural resources, the Climate Action Office, and the state treasurer kind of came together. And it was a recommendation that had also been supported by the Climate Council, and that was part of their January 2024 addendum. So we really tried to very intentionally line up the language.
Finance and management in here. Why did you have that?
Finance and management. I think that was a request that actually there was some discussion about finance and management.
They're in the groups that need to be consulted.
I think that the intention with that was that it was, since the Climate Council, which has all, it's a large group and all parties and all perspectives participating, that was in the Climate Council's amendment. So the language was very much intentionally aligned with that. So because there had been, group agreement about that. So I think that's where that language came from. So I think that I'm covering all the highlights that we had. And then, there is a piece in there around looking at how to better track costs of projects and delays of projects in the bill. And that initially came to our attention through a report that Tim Ashton, as the deputy auditor, made. And that came to us after the T-bill left the House. So we kind of put a pin in it to bring that up this year. And we had a lot of discussion about how best to do that while Via was here and with the agency. So that's what that language, which seems very complicated, but I think we were trying to figure out a way I mean, I think we've all experienced when, to communicate to the legislature to, around these delays, because we certainly hear from communities when projects look like they're planned and get delayed or the cost overrun. So we wanted to do it without it being them producing a second white book for us at the project. So we hope we hit the right note on that.
Well, I wanted to go back, because obviously one of the things we've been concerned about is the plight of our public transit system.
Yeah.
In fact, that benefits potentially more than a single household. It can have very significant impact. And we know that that is a system that is really under a great deal of stress, and in particularly Green Mountain Transit, what is happening there and their fiscal viability and so forth. And so I was just wondering, in terms of taking money from public transit to move to, money's been moved around, but that was how you would fund electrify the central fleet.
You raised a really good, I'm sorry that I kind of did not even address that at the beginning.
So we're really very troubled by the plight of a public, which is one of the key strategies to reduce the number of cars. So we've got one is promoting electric cars, but we've got another that would reduce the number of vehicles potentially on the highway. And so we don't know what we're going to do, obviously.
I'd be happy to share our thinking on that. So in the transportation budget, because of, I'm sure you got testimony on where the $31 million from the carbon reduction money that's coming from the federal government will go over the next several years. The agency identified 3 buckets for that. One was in bike ped, the other one was in fleet electrification, and the third bucket was in transit and micromobility. So this year they made a decision. There are a few decisions. I'll focus on the public transit, but there were 2 buckets. I'm sure in your white book you saw there was a $4 million and a $3.5 million that were coming from the carbon reduction strategy. So those were for, like, I think, Sprinter vans. So there's still, like, there's $4 million and it's being reduced by 1.7 is the House recommendation. We were not confident they would get all that money out, and there's future money that they can decide to backfill that from that same federal grant funding. So what we did was, I'm going to be overly simplistic. We took that federal money and we basically turned it into state money for the EVSE, the electric vehicle supply equipment. And so by putting it through the central garage fund. So we felt like the decision that we made was in alignment with fleet electrification, that whether it be fleet electrification in public transit or within the central garage, but also they had, significant amount of money. It was $7.5 million in 2 different budget lines. Logan had to do some digging to affirm that they were actually separate, that there wasn't a redundancy there. And the testimony that we got was they had done this with bike ped, like that they decided to add $4 million to this current fiscal year on bike ped, which was a surprise to our committee that they did that was going to impact this year, and they were going to do this, and it's a good thing. Our committee supports bike ped, so we were really happy to see that. But I think that was in terms of the public transit, that I don't think these Sprinter vans are necessarily going to solve the public transit problem that Green Mountain Transit might be having. Is it because the federal money is for capital investments, and we share your concerns around public transit, and that's why we put in the recommendation to use $100,000 in policy and planning to do that revenue study, because I think we really need to be looking at the whole picture, not just little.
The revenue studies for all.
And public transit is called out very specifically as one of the areas for this outside consultant to look at.
Yeah, I was surprised to read the other day where electric vehicles aren't selling as well as they thought they would be sold. I think G Stone, I don't think they're even going to carry them. I was surprised. I thought it'd be a bigger demand than there is, and they're not front and center selling. I don't know what the reason is, whether it's charging stations or whatever it is, but
I would think the California standards that are gonna come into play would help.
With that.
Um,
And in fact,
reverse that, I don't know.
and we did get testimony from Vermont Drive Electric that actually, we were concerned about that in the fall too, Senator Mazza. But in December and like the numbers are picking up, and we're seeing a lot of the incentives, the way that they're stacking up are actually accelerating. So we're very encouraged that the electric vehicle adoption.
Are there hybrids or are they just strictly electric?
I think we're talking that they're mostly electric, all electric.
Really?
And I think that they're still selling a lot of them, but they're not selling the curve is still steep, but not as steep as it was the first couple of years. So I think.
And we share that concern. I mean, that's why we want to make sure to remove like that charging is an important, I think range anxiety, you know, you hear about that. People have anxiety about how far they can go in their cars. And I think we want to.
Sometimes it's justified.
Yeah, it is. And so getting that charging infrastructure out and communicating out about it is really important. And we did put some language in to evaluate the marketing of our EV incentive programs to ensure that that Vermonters know about these incentives, because we've recently been hearing both anecdotally and through testimony that when people are stacking up these incentives, they're actually able to get a really affordable car. And we're hearing, and I think you've heard testimony about.
How many charging stations have we got out here in Vermont now?
I would defer to, because Michelle has the top numbers. I know that they've been identified, and it's slow going because I know it's slow going because it's complicated.
Senator, I'm afraid my memory is not as good as it used to be, and I'm gonna have to look that number up while we're talking. Sorry, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Do we have it for both public and for all of them? So charging
Drive Electric
stations.
has that number, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, there may be some, like, anything that's open to the public, it should be in their website.
Senator Chin did ask a question.
You got an app that tells you.
Back a topic to one of the last comments I heard you say regarding the funding for public transit and $100,000 for a study. We also had VPTA present us their analysis and their study. How do you see that $100,000 study on funding public transit as different or building upon the one we received from people?
Well, it's really interesting because I think they're very much in alignment. I think some of the elements that VPTA identified are some of the potential things like they called out. You know, they called us when we had NCS. We had NCSL give a presentation, but states are doing some pretty interesting things. All the states in the U.S. are facing the same challenge. So I think they did in that VIPTA study. They called out some of the legislation that was recently passed, like in Colorado, and then Minnesota is thinking. So I think. Like were delivery fees, right? Like adding a little fee to like if you get a package delivered, or to, folks who are delivering food. Because with the idea that everybody who uses the road should be paying for the road. And I think that's a kind of an agreed upon a simple principle that we can all agree to. And so as people's driving habits are changing and we're driving more fuel efficient cars, then we need to think about different revenues. So I think it would build on some of those ideas, but as you know, we don't necessarily take a fee like that and direct it directly to public transit, which is what I think they were asking us to do.
A very balkanized budget, and then you not withstand
Exactly.
because from year to year, your needs. So every entity, I can tell you from being on appropriations, would like to have
Yes, a dedicated revenue source. Yeah.
source.
And one of the things that I think we also included in that transportation funding language that VIPTA did not cover. I mean, I think it's a sensitive topic for them to talk about how our communities are assessed or paid, because I think we were hoping in the House anyway with that study that we get some analysis of that, and that was not in the study. And I think for them, we did ask them when they gave testimony, it's a little bit sensitive in some ways because they want to have good relationships with the communities that they serve, and they don't want to overburden them with this. But I think that's one area that a larger study could look at without putting them maybe in the middle of that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Although we tend to be schizophrenic, because in that way it's sort of like, well, we'll have this neutral entity tell us what the municipality should contribute. In the next breath, we're saying, oh, we gotta increase this particular revenue stream to the municipalities because they really are so stretched, and we hear that
All the time. Yeah.
So it is a very delicate study, and the question is, ultimately, is that that group of Vermonters, the tax base that you want to use for this particular purpose. And it usually the League of Cities and Towns gets pretty anxious about that because those are the very revenues that they use to support municipal services.
Right.
So there's a lot of dimension on that front.
Yeah, yeah, and I think originally we had, you know, in conversation, we're talking about more of a working group structure that would have had more engagement with, you know, the providers, and then it just was not gonna be the method that would really, could really work. So I would hope, I hear you loud and clear, Senator Kitchell, like how we, like an outside entity telling our communities what to do, but I think we were hoping for some of that analysis in that report that we got from VIPTA, and it wasn't there.
I was thinking more about the decisions that we would be making.
Right, yeah.
And in one breath, we're saying, oh, they're overburdened, and the next breath, they're revenue source to be explored. It's kind of a study in contrast.
Yeah, I just know my community, we, where I live in Guilford, it's very rural. We don't have a lot of service, but we also pay only $250 a year, you know, and I wonder if, you know, if there were an opportunity to have more conversations about how we can better serve those kinds of rural communities, you know what, and we're starting to have some conversations on our way. So it's transportation is so important.
One last question.
Yes,
So this committee generally has an aversion and a concern and sympathy with reports, lots of reports, calling for reports. I think section 20 calls for 4. So do you have any thoughts on what's your committee's sense of reports, requests for reports and so on, and sensitivities to the staff time that's involved with them and so on?
It's so funny because I thought we had, you know, we did a pretty good job to keeping the reports down to oh, this is about EVSE. Yes, this is about, you know, these are recommendations that are kind of fine tuning reports that already come to us, is the way that we were looking at it. But I think because, I mean, we've already, like, I think this morning is kind of exemplary of the concern around, like, are we making these investments in the right places with charging equipment? I think that's what that is. And we did not, you know, the testimony that we had from the agency was that this would not be too burdensome, but.
I have a very specific question for you.
Sure.
It's in a similar page, I think it's in the same section, on page 32 of this.
32.
For when you talk about a rollable distance.
Yes.
Oh, this is this.
We had a debate about whether that was meant wheelchairs. It was about like accessibility for those that are in wheelchairs, or was it about like not having stairs for bikes or?
This replaced some language that said walkable.
Well, it says walkable and rollable. But we didn't know what rollable.
This was one of those things that had a lot of committee discussion, but part of it is because of some new language and thinking about how people, pedestrians, bicyclists, it's also baby strollers in addition to folks in wheelchairs and other rolling devices. So I think it was just to be inclusive.
Okay, so it could be wheelchairs, but it wasn't specifically.
Right, like honestly, there was a lot of talk about baby strollers.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Usually do roll.
Yeah, we were just like, well, this is a term that
We had,
this is not defined, so we didn't talk about baby strollers. We were talking about wheelchairs and those kinds of.
Yeah.
So it wasn't limited to the ADA related issues.
No, not necessarily, yeah. And I think, you know, we had some testimony from, I believe it was like Local Motion that is now kind of using this language, and also Kevin Marshy when coming in to talk about, you know, renaming the Vermont state standards. And Michelle, maybe help me out. What are we calling it now?
Multimodal, I think they might have dropped highway, multimodal guidance document.
Right, so there's,
State standards.
and so I think that when we were discussing this section of the bill, it was informed a little bit by the testimony that we got from Kevin on state standards, so.
I want you to know, in Robert Moses' book, he designed parks with steps, and one of the big problems that mothers had at that point was accessing the parks because he couldn't get the strollers up the
It caused
stairs.
more problems.
He really did. Now think about this. So I just want to connect an actual experience where there was, for the best of intentions, you had a park, but
Right,
the very people you wanted to have access found it difficult.
right.
But we didn't know what is there another term?
Rollable.
Rollable.
I think if there is another, I don't,
And the
I'm very
multimodal, is
open.
there anything that would help?
I have not heard this characterization of this before. In rollable was the first sort of concept of it that had crossed my path outside of accessibility for handicapped individuals.
Oh, both walkable and well, it's gonna be publicly accessible, co-located.
Yeah, and we have a member of our committee who's a planner, and so this language, I think, is, came from her, so, and because she does some of this work, so. I don't think there's a lot of sensitivity, if there's a way to communicate that in a
We
way.
just didn't
that's-
know, we
yeah,
were just sort
yeah.
of giving our own definition.
Yeah,
Which obviously wasn't as comprehensive as we were just back in the ADA world.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Chair Coffey?
You, ATV,
So we have some other things, yeah.
we have some revenue topics that are gonna maybe intersect. the transportation.
Well, yeah, I was gonna ask you, did you guys take testimony at all about the right-of-way charges?
we did. Now, there are two places where that's, being discussed. There's one in a telecom bill that that is,
Well, we just heard they stripped out the right-of-way.
yes, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the chair of that of Environment and Energy, but I did have some discussions with her about why. And my understanding is that they felt that they did need to take a little bit of testimony on it from the Public Service Department point of view, that there were some concerns around security, but also that there could be some easier ways to identify where these poles are located. So that's, I don't know
Well,
much
we were
more than
gonna-
that.
We were gonna maybe take some testimony.
Okay, I think our committee's supportive of the concept. Of course, way to, bring in some revenue for the transportation program. And I think that, yeah.
That's, and then there's, I don't know if you wanna try to explain the ATV thing, but I don't know.
So what I'm gonna bring forward is the Senate Finances right now. My understanding is snowmobiles pay a purchase and use or
No, sales tax.
sales tax when they buy from a dealer
Mhm.
and when they buy private sale. But our ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, only pay sales tax when they buy from a dealer and not private sales. And so it's not gonna be a ton of money, but we are looking to possibly propose consistency, and that might raise a little bit. And then the last thing.
It would be a sales tax, so it wouldn't go to the
Yeah.
transportation fund. If it was purchase and use, it
Mhm.
would.
So that'd be for ATVs, yeah.
Personal sale, private sales,
Okay.
and then electric vehicles,
What about?
registration.
Oh, so that's something we're talking about
I think I had a sense of, yeah, so,
as a,
I mean, we were anticipating dealing with MBUF this year, but we didn't have any, so, I don't think it would be, I can't speak for the committee, but like, not a surprise. So you, in Senate Finance, you do that, or in here?
we do it in here. So we started taking testimony on it, what that would be and how would it be a transition to the
Mhm.
amount-based user fee and.
Yeah, and NCSL has some really great information about what other states are doing too.
Yeah, we looked at
Yeah.
that, and, we had that presentation.
And then the last one is, Senator Ingles really wants to start tax, oh, he just dropped off. I was gonna make a joke about general stores and tax. Sorry. It's my window.
To Josh, your colleague. So, yeah, I mean, we hope that, I'm sure there's room for improvement in our bill. We hope you, agree with us on things that we care about, but, look forward to seeing, your work
Can I ask you about the license plate bill?
Yes, we actually got started, we did Donna Russo Savage did a walkthrough of the bill with the committee, is it yesterday?
You mean the bill that we're.
Which bill,
The
is it
license,
the license
this
plate,
is the
the
veteran's
veterans
license plate. I just keep hearing from this veteran, he feels like there's some conspiracy.
I also corresponded with him so that, to let him know about our process.
Okay, good, because that's what he was asking, because
Yeah.
that 1 year was in the DMV bill, is the 1 year that the DMV bill didn't pass. for this immediate bill.
So, yeah, so I think, I think we're taking some testimony, we're scheduling testimony from the
Okay.
Veterans,
Office.
Office and DMV next week. So, I anticipate, there seems to be support in the committee for that, so I don't anticipate that being a problem. And is it important to this committee whether that it be a standalone bill or can it be incorporated into the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill?
We didn't have a preference. I think at the time we thought, let's just pass it as a separate bill. We thought it could maybe go faster, but I think at this point, whatever works better.
Okay,
I don't know if
all right.
it matters to us. We just supported it.
Great, I think there's some members in the House who will be very happy about that too, so. And then, have you sent us the AT?
It's still in the process, so it's on the floor, and then it went to finance, it's on the floor, and it'll go to appropriations today,
Okay,
maybe lead appropriations today as well.
so that'll be, maybe we'll have a member of your committee come in and talk to our committee when that's, when.
And we're making it better, we're making an amendment to make some changes that we
Okay.
realized after it left.
Great, well, it'll be great to see your work and to see.
The City of Burlington might want to talk to you all about a specific need they have and interest in being able to use these cameras for their municipal enforcement on public lands. We punted on that and said, go talk to the House, so I'll leave it at that.
For parking enforcement. And there's a question about the license plate reader underlying law and whether you need specific permission to use license plate readers or not for parking or other.
It always appears to be simple and there's always more to it.
And municipalities are reading the law differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had two, they had counsel from different municipalities.
Is it still a pilot? Is it still a pilot in your bill?
The self-destruct.
Right, so I think when doing a pilot, you can learn a lot from the
Yeah,
pilot
that's
to
part of it.
improve it are there still fee penalties or, warning and then
Mhm, yeah.
then something, and I quickly read the bill, they were
First
pretty
time a pass.
pass, and the second time, where did you land on the fees?
$80,
80, and then third time,
$160.
Yeah. no points on the license though, right? Okay.
They don't know who's driving it, so it's like a citation or a parking ticket.
And I think those fees were just taken, that Antia took from the regular speeding ticket
Yeah,
fee, so,
to
but
be consistent.
we didn't draw a hard line on
Did
those.
you take any testimony since I had, if you don't mind, I don't want to take up more of your time, may I ask a couple
Yes.
questions? Did you take any testimony from folks who might have concerns about who, if it's, a child might be driving a
Yeah,
car?
we did, and you
Okay.
can, so
Okay.
there's an opportunity to contest it.
Okay, oh, okay,
We
that's great,
specifically put in,
That's
so
great.
Judge Donay gave great testimony, came in twice on the bill. We incorporated his changes, so in ACLU, so there's.
Terrific,
you'll have a
that's
good
great, I'll
list.
get the list
list
of
of
witnesses from Megan, so, great, well.
Yeah.
This is so nice, I didn't get to do this last year, to be preview the C-bill, so this was great, unless,
Oh, trouble.
all right, All right, you guys, do we need to go back up?
Yeah, you want me to do the
I'm
amendment?
coming up, let's go up.
Oh, you're
Oh, you mean the appropriate amendment, are we done on the floor?
20 minutes ago.
Okay, let's go, we're done, I'm done in here, so let's, I would.
Better get the vice chair back up.
Yeah, it's great, I have a great vice chair. All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank
We
you.
look forward to seeing
That's
your work. All right, take care.
For the hook.
Yeah. Get her back to work.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe Logan, you can do this before we have to go to the floor? It shouldn't take too long. Yep. Just so I wanna make sure I understand this money. part. So this is section 2, the money part of moving the 1.7 million, but I guess there's other money on your chart there.
Yep, there's a maintenance transfer and there's the carbon reduction program fund transfer. So 2 seconds.
And do we have, Chair Coffey was referencing the federal grant and how it was allocated. I'm just trying to recollect testimony on that. Was that something that they, in getting into the details, they're arguing, well, this is a federal grant and how that was to be directed and the money for the Sprinter van wasn't necessary. So maybe we'll get a response from the agency, but I don't recollect that we were getting into the grant and how.
We did hear about the grant and the Sprinter vans, but that was before we kind of talked about this.
Yeah,
so-
I had no
Yeah,
context
there's no
at that
context.
point, so I guess I could use a refresher on that.
Right, so I thought first we would get this, so we kind of really understand what they're thinking, and then we can hear the agency's view of why they think their plan is better. So I assume is what they're saying.
You see this?
Unless their position has evolved.
It could evolve, yes, that happens sometimes.
Okay,
I was for it before I was against it.
so for the record, Logan Mowbray with the Joint Fiscal Office. There are 2 money transfers in this proposed bill.
Which is really not much, I mean,
No.
it's tiny.
Not many changes. I've broken them down into 2 sections as they go together and color coded them here. So there's the maintenance transfer and the carbon reduction program fund transfer. The maintenance one's a little more straightforward, so we'll start with that. In blue, they're decreasing the maintenance appropriation by $2 million, giving that money town highway structures, town highway aid program, and one-time e-bike appropriation. So 1 million for town highway structures, 860 for aid.
So it's a very straight transfer just from the maintenance budget and just saying like, well, if you need the maintenance, well, we'll hear from
Yep,
the
and-
agency
and
later what they say.
There is language in the T-bill that gives the agency the ability to replenish the maintenance budget with leftover monies from 2024 if they need to do that. I will make note that that has been in previous year's budgets where they've taken money from maintenance and given them the ability to replenish that, and the agency has not ever needed to make use of
Seems
that.
like this would be a low year for maintenance.
But if they needed to, they could theoretically do that.
Okay.
The,
And it was 3,000, I guess. I had another question. So I guess that's pretty straightforward.
The only thing is, which I'm not clear on, is the 2 million, I'm clear, but its use would be, once you've moved that money out to town highway aid, you're actually reducing the base and increasing the base somewhere else. Is that what's happening here?
Is the aid program the one that's based on?
Yes.
formula?
So they are increasing the base for town highway aid program, so next year.
915, which means that we have reduced, the 2 million is not just a one-time take of the base of maintenance. It is basically taking 860,000 of it and saying, we're just moving that permanently.
It has to come from somewhere, yes. Whether the agency next year decides to do that from the maintenance department, they are perpetually increasing the town highway aid program by 860.
Because we have a floor of what it is.
So that will come from somewhere within their budget, yes, next year.
And that's the one that's based on miles.
Yeah,
Well, and
the
also,
allocation
there
of the
was
towns is.
inflation and there was a formula.
There is a formula that is being not withstood this year, but there is a formula that
It's
Allocates.
being not withstood because we're increasing it?
was that?
So it's being not withstood because we're increasing it or we're not meeting it?
It was, yes, it's being not withstood because we're increasing the base. So the formula was the pre-house recommended number, and it's being not withstood now to increase it by 860. But the number here, the 28, 6 million, whatever, is 600,000, sorry, is what the formula calculated, and that's level funded based on the calculations of the past two,
So we, and I just need to be clear then, what the governor proposed, the 28,672
Yep.
is in fact what the existing formula would have
correct.
said we would pay.
Correct. But the reason that they wanted to increase it by 860 is because when you do the calculation, looking back at the last two fiscal year appropriations, there was a decrease essentially in overall appropriations. So the formula for town highway aid this year was level funded. It didn't increase from last year. And their thought was, if you were to remove reversions from that calculation, how much would it have increased this year? And they came to the answer of 860 or 3%, which is based on the CPIU calculation. So they're like, for this year, we're going to notwithstand the formula and pretend that it was going to be increased based on CPIU.
So we're notwithstanding it to give more,
Correct.
which is usually not what,
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Okay, and the highway structures is a competitive grant for bridges and culverts and things like that.
Yeah.
And they just like, there's more damage on the roads, there's more need.
They felt that, yeah, towns and municipalities could use the extra, so they gave $1 million and told the agency to fund $1 million.
And that doesn't really affect us, that's not a base, that's just the agency comes up with that number every year, but I assume they try to kind of keep it around the same number every year.
There's a minimum in statute,
Other
but,
structures.
for structures, yeah, but,
and the requests always exceed the amount, have been for years.
And that's when you kind of like have a whole calendar of like, you can get one, if you haven't got a grant for so many years, you kind of get extra points.
Was the thinking that that million would, I mean, let's face it, if you're replacing the money in maintenance, I mean, money is all fungible, but the big question is, once you move something out, depending on where you're moving it, it becomes the base. You're not going back and reconsidering it. So you can plug the maintenance, maybe because of whatever you're delaying projects, but ultimately, there might be a year that full maintenance and more would be necessary, but you've built, there's no way you're going to go back and say, we'll revert back to the formula with town highway aid. You probably, would the formula recalculated based on the new appropriation?
so next year it would, whatever
It would be based
increase
on
the formula comes up, it would be an increase based on the 29.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, not the 28.
So my only point is, once we do this, this is an ongoing commitment and reallocation or redirection of money from that very flexible maintenance, I mean, and unpredictable demand area of the budget to an area that we know we can never go back and say that's an area that you're gonna take money away from.
Right. So no, shouldn't it?
All right, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, unless you notwithstand the formula, obviously you can.
No, I'm talking about politically.
Sure.
I'm not talking about,
We can do it when we have.
I got, okay, yes.
the feasibility of doing it is the, anything to do with reduction of, commitment to municipalities. That's what was the earlier conversation about, in one breath, we're saying they really need the money, and in another breath, we're thinking about a way of extracting money from public transit, which is interesting dynamic here, at work, but,
Yeah.
okay.
So no, shouldn't
I
it?
feel like we had this conversation almost precisely the same 2 years ago. Didn't we end up doing something where the 2024 carryover would be used to
We did it one time, so it didn't affect the base, I thought, or something like that.
where we
Or
landed
did
as
we?
a compromise to take the.
Well, maybe Michelle can help our memories.
But one year we did increase it, I think, when we thought was a reason to, but other years, I remember my first year, we notwithstood it, so, because we didn't fund the full amount.
We didn't want to change the base, and so we basically said that you
Yeah.
have it if we,
Yes.
if there's money from this year into next year. That was the compromise on the conference.
So for the maintenance, like if there's maintenance savings.
That doesn't ring a bell?
That rings a bell.
I gave a presentation to the House on town highway structures. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there has been movement over the past few years, and there's been some notwithstanding and some increasing.
Oh, you did like a chronology then?
Yeah, I had it. I don't think I have it with me now. I can bring that in if there are questions on that. But
Okay.
there has been a lot of movement in this.
It's like the idea, if we don't spend it in maintenance this year, let's roll it into the town highways next year and not change the maintenance base. I feel like that's what we did.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
remember what,
I don't remember what we did, but I'm not automatically opposed to doing this. I mean, I guess because the agency has more flexibility with the maintenance budget, where the towns don't really. Like they can't, I mean, go back, they just go to their own taxpayers and raise property taxes.
yeah, which they do, but I think we need to be clear that what we're doing is increasing the base in 915 and decreasing the base in the 905.
Right.
That this isn't just a one-time.
But it's not a permanent decrease in the maintenance. They could move money into the maintenance somewhere. It's like, there's not a,
But then they're gonna have to take it away from projects or other areas.
And if they do
So-
that, that won't change the base, right? That would just be a one-time move.
for maintenance, there isn't like a regulatory reason for a base or something. It's just like, make an estimate on what the cost is gonna be.
Ultimately, what you're doing is taking 860,000 off the table to be used for other places in the state transportation construct total.
Yeah.
So usually it'll come out of projects. So or whether it's paving or whether it's other things. So that's how they would make up the money in maintenance, is they're gonna defer projects or,
Yeah.
or a paving project or something like that. So it's just, people need to be clear that the impact is gonna be felt, and as
Yeah.
long as maintenance.
It's not
is-
free money.
No, there's no such thing as free money on.
Again, the towns like it, but it just comes from money that's not gonna do it, either staff or a project.
But in theory, the towns will use it for maintenance as well, it'll just be on town roads.
They can use it for anything.
Yeah.
Town highway aid they can use it for vehicles, they can use it for anything.
I think it is used for,
Yeah,
the highway aid, I think people use it for maintenance and projects, but they can use it to help buy a truck.
It's pretty, it's like a grant,
I'd rather see that 140 go all the back to the town highway aid. I'm just not.
but that's a one-time, so what you're doing is decreasing the base and maintenance.
You'd rather go into the aid program or the structure program?
Somewhere other than e-bikes, I feel
Oh, that
like
140, yeah.
in these financial times, I just don't support the 140 going to the e-bike program.
I'd rather put it toward charging or something like that.
Right, or public transportation.
Or public, but that, if you do that, then you're making an ongoing obligation, because that 140, if you move it into public transit, unless it's capital, and they need it for operating, it's a one-off. So either that, or you say, oh, well, we're gonna reduce that amount from maintenance as well.
You could, I think,
Or you just lower it from 2 million to 1 million,
I think
860.
last year they increased town highway, or in a couple years past, they increased town highway, and they specifically stated that it wasn't to increase the base. It was only for this
Right.
year, and next year calculations would not take it into account. So that is an option too.
And so
Would that be more palatable?
I don't, at this point, I'm not prepared to say.
Yeah, well, this was mainly just to understand the construct, and we can talk about it later. It seems like we're not gonna close this section out, these sections that transfer the money, but maybe before we end, can you just give us the other transfer?
Yep. So the other transfer is using carbon reduction program funds, which are federal funds that are in the GovRec, they're in the public transit. There's $4 million going to buy e-Sprinter vans.
So for who?
Is there a match? Is there a match on that?
Yes, 20%.
So this is for like NTI grants kind of thing?
It's similar to, yeah, this
Kinda
would
like
be
the-
like built into the public transit grant applications. So the providers, we have their inventories, we know when they need new equipment, and they can put in for equipment every year, and so they would be putting in.
And this is the kind of van that Caleb is using in Morrisville, right? The other towns would be able to do that
And this is there a deadline on when this money has to be used this year?
Yeah, I think
Is
it's
it 26?
it's 3 years after the end of IIJA, so I think it's
Oh, it's a
actually
little later,
27
27.
maybe.
So they take the 1.7 out of that grant, put it into central garage to kind of turn it into state money and then put it towards.
Well, they have to give it to environmental planning, or environmental policy and sustainability. And then they're directing environmental policy and sustainability to electrify $1.7 million worth of central garage fleet. And because they're doing it that through environmental policy and sustainability, they're reducing the central garage fund by
They're nominal
1.7.
money around.
Because you can't give it straight, because the central garage fund is paid through the maintenance budget. So we couldn't give the federal funds straight to central garage.
But
So they're doing that, and the central garage is gonna use the 1.7 for electrification of their fleet.
Well, yes,
But I thought
yes,
they're also putting 1.7 into the charging network.
they are. And then, so they're transferring 1.7 million from the central garage fund back into the T fund to make it T fund dollars. And then they're having the agency, they're appropriating one-time $1.7 million to the agency, having the agency transfer it to ACCD to use in their EVSE program.
So is there really only negative the 1.7 away from the Sprinter van, so and the other money
Yeah,
is
yeah, it's just
you know,
shifting, yeah.
I'm a little concerned about that because those, in fact, are investments to make the system more, to,
the public transit.
yeah, the public transit. And that once that money's been diverted, even though it hasn't been spent yet, it's gone. We're basically saying this is a higher priority than helping with capital expenditures with these public transit agencies. And I'm not comfortable doing that, to be honest, because I'm not saying that those are not helpful to individual households, but if you're able to purchase Sprinter vans that help
Right.
Address transportation needs for, I don't know, many more.
Right, and I think they're key, like, I think one of the failures of the Montpelier microtransit is using the cutaway vans
Yeah.
for that. It's difficult, it's not the best, and you have to have the CDL driver, so I could, like, those programs could run a lot better if they had
The Sprinters.
electric scooters.
And so once the
cost should
money's
be-
gone, even though they haven't spent it, it's gone. It means that you want to spend it for something different unless there's more money there. Is there more money there, Michelle?
There is more future money, but I think that what's at the crux of this maneuver assumes that the central garage can consume $1.7 million for electrifying the fleet. In this current year, we're investing $2 million in central garage to electrify the fleet.
From other money, or from that same
From
grant.
that same grant program. And so, our staff have been, since this came up, have been analyzing, could they really consume another 1.7 million in these funds in that short period of time, given our fleet electrification plans, where we know public transit can consume those funds. And the other thing I've asked Patrick to look into is we have that EPA carbon reduction program grant that we're applying for. How many millions of dollars in there are for the community charging program?
So there might be more money for that program, and then you also have all the NEVI money that you're deploying.
Yeah, and the NEVI money, is different than the community
Right.
charging program money, but, I think
Still would be
The
accessible.
the
but-
NEVI money, is, level 3 charging, whereas the community charging program is for multi-units, and, these are all important things, obviously, still, but, I think my biggest concern is that Central Garage can't consume that much additional money right now.
That's good here, okay.
And my concern is that I would put the Sprinter vans and making our public transit systems more responsive and more flexible to meet Vermonters' transportation needs. I just, that's not a place I want to go. I think the more we can do to make that structure responsive build, and so you're not, you don't have the CDL, and all the costs that are expensive. I just see that.
Fuel costs should go down.
Yeah, I just, if you were to ask me to prioritize, I would say that's where I would feel more Vermonters would benefit. And environmentally, we would get a bigger return. But that's only my.
Yes. I think there's support for that position. So thank you, Logan. I think that's what we needed. That helps me. This is to understand kind of what the impact of moving has around.
Thank you.
So unless there's any other questions for Logan, we can adjourn and prepare for the floor session. So we can adjourn for the day and for the week.